Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Transformers: Rise of the Beasts 2023, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. It starts not with the roar of engines or the clash of metal, but with something ancient stirring beneath the stars, a cosmic secret buried far before the age of man, one that pulses through time, echoing into the streets of 1990s Brooklyn and the thick jungles of Peru. The past isn't just prologue here, it's a force waiting to be awakened. And when it does, the earth trembles not under the weight of machines, but the destiny they carry. This isn't just another battle between Autobots and Decepticons. It's something bigger, something older, something wilder. The war that once raged across Cybertron is about to collide with an ancient threat tied not to technology, but to primal power. It's a collision of timelines and titans, a story that blends the mechanical with the mythological, giving rise to a new kind of warrior, one that roars like a beast and charges like a storm. At the center of this surge is a young man trying to find his place in a world that doesn't seem to see him. Noah Diaz, a former military electronics expert with a heart bigger than the city he calls home, is desperate to provide for his family but finds himself at odds with a system stacked against him. His life takes an unexpected turn when a stolen car turns out to be anything but ordinary. It's not a machine, it's a sentinel. And in the blink of an eye, Noah is pulled from the grit of Brooklyn into a galactic struggle that stretches across continents and time. That stolen car? It's Mirage, slick, smart-mouthed, and utterly unforgettable. A transformer unlike any we've seen before, Mirage doesn't just shift into gear, he shifts the very rules of the game. His bond with Noah becomes the heart of the story, built not on awe, but on camaraderie. There's humor, frustration, loyalty, and a sense that, maybe for the first time, these battles aren't just about saving the world. They're about who gets to be a hero in it. But the metal tide doesn't stop there. As the sky cracks open and energies long dormant begin to flare, Optimus Prime returns, burdened, serious, and not yet the unwavering leader he will become. This is a version of him still learning the cost of command. His mistrust of humanity runs deep, but Noah forces him to reconsider, not through speeches, but through action. There's something raw and real in their dynamic, a push and pull between idealism and lived experience. And then the earth shifts. Deep in the wilds of Peru, the ancient past begins to roar to life. Here, the story takes a turn, ushering in a new era of transformation, one rooted not in machinery, but in instinct. The Maximals enter, and with them comes a seismic change in tone. These aren't your typical Cybertronian warriors. They are part beast, part machine, fused with the DNA of the most powerful creatures to ever walk the planet. Erizor with her wings of flame, Rhinox charging with the weight of mountains, Cheetor moving faster than thought itself, and at the head of them all, the stoic, towering figure of Optimus Primal. Optimus Primal isn't a reflection of his namesake. He's something else entirely. Wiser, more grounded, touched by ancient pain and hard-earned peace. His connection to the world is spiritual, almost elemental. He doesn't fight to win, he fights to protect something sacred. And when he and Optimus Prime come face to face, it's not just two leaders meeting. It's two legacies deciding whether to collide or converge. But if the Autobots are hope and the Maximals are memory, the threat rising against them is something darker than either has faced. Unicron, a planet-eating force of annihilation, moving through the galaxy like a storm of teeth and shadow. He isn't interested in conquest. He is entropy incarnate. And beneath him, serving with loyalty twisted by desperation, is Scourge, a terrifying enforcer with a face like molten hate and a soul carved from ruin. Every battle he enters feels less like war and more like execution. He is the reminder that not all who serve power are lost. Some are made to be monsters. The key to stopping this apocalyptic threat lies in a mysterious artifact, the transwarp key, capable of opening portals across time and space. It's not just a tool. It's a temptation. The key could send the Autobots home, but using it risks bringing Unicron to Earth. The stakes spiral, the choices tighten. It's not just about saving the world, it's about choosing which parts of yourself you're willing to sacrifice to do it. As Noah and Elena, a sharp and determined museum researcher, dive into the secrets buried beneath ancient ruins, their journey becomes something more than survival. It becomes an unraveling of human history, revealing that Earth was never just a battleground. It was always part of the story. The temples, the carvings, the hidden doors, they're not Easter eggs. They're breadcrumbs leading back to the truth. The past and the future have always been intertwined. The action is relentless. Trains crashing through jungles, robots tumbling from mountaintops, explosions blooming like metal flowers in the sky, but the film never loses its soul. Amid the chaos, characters grow. Trust is tested. Sacrifices are made. When a certain Autobot makes a choice that redefines courage, it doesn't feel like CGI. It feels like heartbreak. And then, when all seems lost, something ancient awakens, not from above, but from within. The climax brings together every thread, technology, mythology, humanity, into a single, breathtaking sequence. The jungles become war zones, the skies turn to fire, and in the center of it all stands a young man in a mech suit forged from friendship and flame, standing shoulder to shoulder with Titans. Noah doesn't become a superhero. He becomes something rarer. He becomes necessary. And as the dust clears and the metal cools, the story leaves us not with an ending, but with a beginning. A hint at a world even larger than we imagined. A whispered name. A shadowed symbol. The suggestion that the battles we've seen were just the opening salvos in a much bigger war. Because the beasts have risen up. The key has turned up. And somewhere in the stars, the next chapter is already rumbling to life. Once Upon a Time doesn't quite capture it. This isn't the fairy tale you remember. This is a tale reborn, cloaked in shadow, pulled into the light, and told through a lens that understands both legacy and longing. This story doesn't whisper through pages. It burns through the screen, glinting with danger and the shimmer of something ancient. A girl with skin like snow, lips like blood, and a heart that refuses to break, steps from the mythic world of lullabies and into something far more defiant and far more real. This isn't about happily ever after. This is about how you earn it. What begins with a crown twisted by jealousy quickly turns into a chase across forests that seem to breathe, mountains that conceal more than snow, and villages where rebellion brews in silence. At the center of it all is a girl, royal by birth, hunted by blood, and unshakable by choice. She has been named by stars and feared by mirrors, but she is no longer content to wait for rescue. She's going to forge it herself. This version of her story pulses with magic, yes, but also with rebellion. The court is not just gilded halls, it's a prison in disguise. And the queen? She's not merely wicked. She's terrifyingly human. A woman driven by the fear of being forgotten, of being replaced, of losing beauty in a world that praises it above all else. Her obsession is not vanity. It's desperation. Her mirror doesn't lie. It taunts. And so begins a hunt. When the king dies under mysterious circumstances, the court darkens. The queen rises. Her rule is swift, suffocating, cruel. And the girl, barely a teenager, is pushed to the edges of her own home. Her name is forbidden in whispers. Her image scrubbed from the halls. But a crown can't erase the truth of birthright. The people remember. The forest remembers. And one night, when she's meant to be executed in silence, the blade meant for her instead cuts through her chains. A sympathetic guard hesitates, just long enough for her to run. She flees into the forest, but the woods aren't just thickets and vines. They are alive, ancient, threaded with old enchantments that twist the paths and murmur to those who dare cross them. Here, the air feels thick with memory. Trees loom like sentinels. Shadows flicker with half-formed creatures. She doesn't know it yet, but she's stepped into the very heart of the magic the queen fears. It is here, in the wild, that she is transformed. She sheds the silks of the palace for leather and moss. Her reflection, once framed in polished glass, now lives in the still waters of creeks and the eyes of animals that do not judge her by birthright, but by how still she stands, how strong her spirit burns. And it is here she meets them. Not dwarves, exactly. Not the comical figures of cartoons or the jolly craftsmen of childhood tales. These are outcasts, warriors, mystics, healers, each marked by something the world rejected. 7 souls bound by pain and place, living on the edges of empire. They don't welcome her immediately. Trust is not given. It is earned. But slowly, as she listens, learns, fights, and bleeds beside them, they begin to see her not as a princess, but as one of their own. She learns that the queen's power extends further than she imagined. Villages burn under royal decree. Magic users are hunted and silenced. The land itself begins to rot, twisted by spells cast to maintain youth and beauty. This isn't about jealousy anymore. It's about control. The queen is feeding off the very essence of the kingdom. And the only thing that can stop her is the one girl she couldn't kill. As the resistance forms, old magic awakens. A relic buried deep beneath the mountain pulses with life, a shard of the mirror, cast out long ago, still humming with truth. It is said to show not your reflection, but your soul. And when the girl gazes into it, she doesn't see a princess. She sees fire. She sees every wound she's endured, every loss, every small defiance, stitched together into something indestructible. And in that moment, she stops running. She begins planning. But back at the palace, the queen is unraveling. Her mirror cracks. Her spells flicker. Her beauty fades in flashes when she's alone. Her obsession grows darker. She creates a new poison, not of apples, but of illusion. A spell to bend minds, to charm with a glance, to turn love into loyalty so twisted that even betrayal becomes devotion. She sends out a new hunter, this one bound by enchantment, a man whose heart beats only to her command. And he's not just a killer. He's a ghost from the girl's past. A friend once lost in the palace's cruelty. Now returned, but not truly whole. Their encounter in the woods is haunting. He finds her. He raises the blade. And yet, something within him shakes. Magic can command flesh, but the soul remembers. Her voice is a key, her memory a mirror, and in the moment between breath and blood, he hesitates. Again. Just like the first. And that's all she needs. They don't kill each other. They wake each other. With the queen's weapon broken, the tide turns. But magic is never done screaming. The final battle brews not just in sword and arrow, but in words, in truth, in the shattered pieces of the queen's mirror. It is said that when the whole of the mirror is pieced back together, the person who stands before it will face their full truth. And the queen fears nothing more than that. As the pieces are gathered, hidden in caves, in ruins, in the depths of haunted lakes, the girl grows. She's no longer running from death. She's chasing justice. Her companions, once fractured, are now united. The kingdom begins to stir. Whispers of the lost princess spread like embers in wind. And the queen? She prepares. She sharpens every spell, poisons her own beauty, turns her throne into a fortress of bone and frost. But the twist lies deeper still. The final shard of the mirror is in the queen's possession, and it is said that whoever gazes into the whole reflection last will either rule forever or be unmade entirely. The queen plans to trap the girl within it, to reflect her soul and shatter it. But what she doesn't understand is this: the girl's soul cannot be broken, because it has already been broken and rebuilt. And that is what makes it invincible. When they meet at last, it is not the duel expected. It is a reckoning words cut deeper than steel. Truth bends the walls of the palace. The mirror, restored, does not serve the queen. It judges, and it sees her, not as she wishes to be seen, but as she truly is. Alone. Afraid. Forgotten. She screams, but there is no spell left to cast. And the girl. She doesn't strike the final blow. She simply turns away, and in doing so, takes back everything. The kingdom does not erupt in cheers. It exhales. The land begins to bloom. The people emerge from their hiding. The forest quiets. The girl, now a leader not because of blood, but because of choice, stands before her people not with a crown, but with a promise. She will not rule with mirrors and fear. She will rule with memory, with fire. And the story, reborn in ash and wonder, lives on. Not as a bedtime tale, but as a call to rise. Because this is not about a poisoned apple. It's about a voice that could not be silenced, a soul that could not be broken, and a mirror that finally told the truth. It begins with stillness. The kind of stillness that masks rot beneath perfume, where candles burn beside cold food and mirrors whisper truths no one dares speak aloud. The palace stands tall, its towers slicing the sky like judgment. But inside, something is unraveling, silk and silver hiding a kingdom that has forgotten how to breathe. At the center of it all is a girl. Her name is spoken in hushed tones, when it's spoken at all. Her skin pale as frost, her lips crimson, her gaze heavy with unspoken dreams. She doesn't speak of rebellion. She listens to it grow inside her. The queen sits on the throne now. After the king's death, an illness, they said, though no doctor had been summoned, the court became a quiet, frozen place. Its laughter muffled. Its doors locked from the inside. The queen rules with elegance sharpened into a blade. Her beauty is flawless, but there is something unnatural about it. Unaging. Untouched. The servants say she speaks to a mirror that no one else dares look into. They say she asks it the same question every morning, and that lately its answer has begun to change. The girl, meanwhile, is kept from the public. Her appearances are rare, her presence ghostly. She's watched like a prisoner. Guards stationed at her door wear crimson cloaks, elegant from afar, menacing up close. Her days are filled with books she's not allowed to choose and meals delivered on silver trays that always seem a little too cold. But her mind, it doesn't obey locks. She listens to the servants gossiping through the walls. She watches the queen's face stiffen with each passing day. And she waits. One night, the queen visits her chambers. Dressed in a gown that seems woven from midnight itself, she stands at the foot of the bed and simply stares. "You remind me of something I buried," she says, her voice like velvet strangling thorns. "Let's make this easier for both of us." The girl doesn't respond. She knows it's not a conversation. It's a sentence. The next day she's summoned for a walk beyond the walls, a rare excursion, chaperoned by a man with a blade and a command. Make it look like an accident. But the forest is older than any kingdom. The hunter, chosen for his obedience, hesitates. Whether it's the way the light catches in her eyes, or the way the wind seems to move when she does, something in him fractures. He doesn't kill her. He tells her to run. And she does. Into the trees. Into the unknown. Into a world that does not care about crowns. The forest is no friend. But it is honest. Its trees are knotted with memory. The path twists even as she runs, roots rising to trip her, thorns clawing at her dress. The sun dips early, shadows fall thick. She stumbles through bramble, across stone, into clearings that feel like they've waited centuries for footsteps. And somehow, even breathless, scraped and barefoot, she doesn't feel afraid. She feels awake. Somewhere, distant and cruel, the queen feels it too. The mirror cracks that morning. Not shatters, but splinters. A thin, spiderweb line. Enough to make her pause. Enough to make her furious. She orders huntsmen into the forest. Sends birds with black glass eyes to search the treetops. She speaks to the mirror with venom and gets silence in return. But the girl is nowhere near the edge of the trees now. She's gone deeper. Deeper into a clearing that shouldn't exist, where 7 small homes curl beneath roots and moss, like mushrooms after rain. But they're not empty. She's not the first to be cast out. This forest has always collected the forgotten, the broken, the different. And here live the ones whom time tried to erase, each one marked by strangeness, by magic, by pain. The first to find her is wary. He walks with a limp and talks in short, clipped words. Another hides behind a curtain of hair, speaking only in riddles. One wears armor made from the bones of beasts long vanished. But they are not cruel. They are cautious. And when they see the way she doesn't flinch at the fire, doesn't recoil from the stories they tell, something shifts. She stays. Not as a guest. As a shadow among them. Helping, learning, listening. They tell her how the queen hunts all things that grow without her permission. How villages have gone quiet. How rivers have turned bitter. They speak of an apple orchard burned to ash because its fruit bloomed redder than her lips. And as she listens, the anger in her builds, not loud or blazing, but steady. Like roots pushing through stone, they teach her to wield a blade. Not with flourish, but with purpose. How to carve wood. How to snare rabbits. How to walk without sound. The one who speaks in riddles shows her where to find the mushrooms that glow blue beneath the moon. Another gives her a cloak stitched from crow feathers, black, with a shimmer that mimics shadow. They don't treat her like a princess. They treat her like a spark. Back at the castle, the queen grows crueler. The mirror no longer lies. It stutters. And when she commands it to show her the girl, it flickers, images of flame and steel, of eyes no longer pleading but daring. The queen turns to darker magic. She summons an alchemist who works in whispers, a spellweaver who has been asleep for decades. She speaks of curses, of fruit, of blood. The spell they craft together is old, not meant to kill, but to stop time in its tracks. But magic does not give without taking. In the forest, the animals move differently now. Deer freeze mid-step. Owls hoot in strange rhythms. The girl senses it, a shift in the air, like breath held too long. And then the birds stop singing. That's when the visitor arrives. A woman in a tattered robe, eyes sunken, voice gentle. She carries a basket of apples, one of them gleaming red, impossibly so. She finds the girl alone, near the edge of the clearing, humming to herself as she skins bark from a branch. They speak, briefly. The woman offers her the fruit. A gift, she says, for kindness. The girl hesitates. She takes it, but does not eat it. She carries it back to the cabin. That night, she places it on the windowsill. In the moonlight, it pulses. And far away, the queen smiles. But the bite is still to come. And the forest still breathes. The night settles like a secret, draping the forest in shadows too thick to breathe. Inside the small cabin, quiet reigns. The red apple still sits untouched on the windowsill, its skin catching moonlight like it's made of glass instead of fruit. The girl doesn't sleep. Not deeply. Her dreams are thin and broken, laced with the echo of the queen's voice, like a thorn sliding under her skin. But she doesn't wake, not even when the wind howls low through the trees. When morning comes, the clearing is not as it was. The birds stay hidden. The fire doesn't light on the first try. And the apple, once bright, has dulled just slightly, like something beneath the skin has begun to rot. The girl picks it up, weighing it in her palm. It feels heavier than it should. She brings it to her lips. She doesn't know why she bites. Maybe she's tired of running. Maybe she's trying to reclaim something. Power, defiance, control over a story that's always belonged to someone else. Or maybe it's just curiosity. But the moment her teeth break the skin, the world folds inward. It's not pain that hits her. It's silence. Her knees buckle before she can call out. The apple rolls from her hand, red streaked with her breath. Her eyes close like doors being slammed. And by the time the others find her, it's too late. She doesn't look dead. She looks almost peaceful, like a statue of herself, carved in sleep, heart slowed to a whisper. Panic ripples through the cabin. The 7 don't shout. They don't cry. They move with reverence, with disbelief, with something like mourning pressing against their ribs. One of them takes the apple and crushes it beneath his heel, red juice pooling like blood. Another swears they saw a raven watching from the trees, eyes like obsidian. They know who did this. Back in the castle, the queen is radiant again. Her mirror is whole. Its cracks sealed with shadow and bone. When she speaks, its answers come quick and obedient. She preens in silence, dressing in silks the color of storms, her beauty sharp enough to cut through glass. The kingdom begins to wake beneath her reign, not in joy, but in fear. The girl is gone. No one says it out loud, but they feel it. The sky itself feels colder. In the forest, the 7 build a casket of crystal and oak. Not buried, not hidden. They place it on a raised platform, in the heart of the clearing, where sunlight breaks through the leaves in thin, golden lines. They take turns watching over her, telling her stories as if she can still hear them. Her skin never pales. Her lips never lose their color. She remains as she was, still, but not gone. But stories do not end with silence. Word spreads. From the forest to the villages, from the mouths of hunters to the ears of those who still remember her name. They speak of the girl with the snow-pale skin and fire in her eyes. They say she sleeps now, not dead, not alive, not forgotten. And with each telling, the fear that the queen's grip is unbreakable begins to waver. One traveler, drawn by the whispers, makes his way into the forest. He is not a prince. He wears no crown. His boots are dusted with miles. He's heard the stories. He doesn't believe them, not fully, but something in him aches to see the truth for himself. When he enters the clearing, the silence greets him like an old friend. He steps up to the casket and looks down, expecting stillness, expecting the echo of myth. But what he sees instead is her. Her face. Her strength. Her defiance, caught mid-dream. And something shifts. This is not love at first sight. This is recognition. As if he's found a part of the story that was always meant to be his. He reaches out, fingers brushing hers through the crystal, and in that moment, just as the last leaf falls from the tree above her, she gasps. Her eyes snap open. The forest inhales. And far away, the mirror shatters once more. She wakes not gently, but like someone drowning breaking the surface. She coughs, sits up, eyes wild, lungs burning with breath she hasn't taken in days. The others rush forward, half in shock, half in joy. The traveler stumbles back, unsure if he's dreaming. She grips his hand and steadies herself, and the look in her eyes is not wonder. It's clarity. She remembers everything. The queen, the apple, the spell, the forest, the way the world turned against her and how she found herself in its ruins. She's done running. She stands now, and the air bends around her, not with magic, but with something older. Purpose. She doesn't return to the castle with an army. She returns with truth. The 7 walk beside her, blades drawn, voices sharp. The traveler follows, not as a rescuer, but as a witness. The forest parts for her like it's always known she would come back. When she reaches the gates, she doesn't beg for entry. She knocks. Once. Loud enough to shake the stone. Inside, the queen feels it. She knows. She tries to prepare, drapes herself in her darkest spells, speaks the old words, breathes fire into mirrors that no longer reflect her face. But the palace is already shifting. Servants move differently now. The guards hesitate. When the doors open, it's not a battle that begins. It's an ending. The girl doesn't attack. She walks. Her steps echo like thunder. The queen stands at the top of the staircase, eyes wide, hands trembling beneath her gloves. They speak no words. They don't need to. This moment has always been coming. The queen casts her spell, but it falters. It curls into smoke before it can reach her. The girl raises her hand and holds out the broken shard of the apple, its bite mark still raw. "This is all you've ever been," she says. "Rotting beauty and a lie." The queen screams. She lunges. But the girl doesn't flinch. It is not magic that stops the queen. It's truth. The mirror behind her, cracked beyond repair, shows her reflection, not as she wishes to be, but as she is. Alone. Frightened. Wilted. The queen falls to her knees, and the palace, for the first time in years, falls quiet. The girl does not take the throne. She doesn't want it. Not in the way others do. But the people want her. They flood the halls, eyes bright, voices rising. They cheer not for royalty, but for return. For resilience. For the girl who became more than the story ever allowed her to be. In the days that follow, the palace is transformed. The thorns are torn down. The windows unshuttered. The queen is not executed. She is exiled, left to wander with only her reflection. And the girl, now awake, now whole, does not become a queen. She becomes something freer. A guardian of the wild. A voice for those silenced. A legend with her own pen. And far beyond, in the depths of the forest, the trees whisper her name not as a curse, but as a promise. She was always more than her name. Not a damsel in distress, not a fragile symbol of innocence waiting for fate to decide her story. She was something else entirely. A quiet flame, a defiant echo beneath all the whispers, a girl shaped not by the roles given to her, but by the ones she dared to unmake. Her name may be spoken with reverence, but what lies behind it is resistance, silent at first, then unstoppable. Every glance, every decision, every step into shadow and back again reveals a character not defined by the glass coffin she slept in, but by the fire she woke up with. She begins as a daughter of the court, a child bound by tradition and bloodline. But even from the earliest moments, there is something in her that doesn't bend the way others do. She doesn't want it. Not in the way others do. But the people want her. They flood the halls, eyes bright, voices rising. They cheer not for royalty, but for return. For resilience. For the girl who became more than the story ever allowed her to be. In the days that follow, the palace is transformed. The thorns are torn down. The windows unshuttered. The queen is not executed. She is exiled, left to wander with only her reflection. And the girl, now awake, now whole, does not become a queen. She becomes something freer. A guardian of the wild. A voice for those silenced. A legend with her own pen. And far beyond, in the depths of the forest, the trees whisper her name not as a curse, but as a promise. She was always more than her name. Not a damsel in distress, not a fragile symbol of innocence waiting for fate to decide her story. She was something else entirely. A quiet flame, a defiant echo beneath all the whispers, a girl shaped not by the roles given to her, but by the ones she dared to unmake. Her name may be spoken with reverence, but what lies behind it is resistance, silent at first, then unstoppable. Every glance, every decision, every step into shadow and back again reveals a character not defined by the glass coffin she slept in, but by the fire she woke up with. She begins as a daughter of the court, a child bound by tradition and bloodline. But even from the earliest moments, there is something in her that doesn't bend the way others do. While most fairy tale films rely heavily on green screens and digitally rendered landscapes, this production chose a path less traveled. They built a real forest. Yes, a forest, on a soundstage. Towering trees rooted into movable soil beds. Hand-painted mushrooms, tree hollows with breathing mechanisms, vines fed through pulleys that allowed them to subtly sway as actors walked past. The production team even released real fog, timed to machines that mimicked breath patterns. Each morning, set designers would walk through barefoot to test the softness of the moss. But the oddest element of all? Birds. Specifically, ravens. On more than one occasion, a raven appeared on set despite no such birds being scheduled for those scenes. No one knew where they came from. Animal handlers hadn't brought them. Some thought they were trained birds from neighboring productions, others whispered about omens. One day, a raven landed on the Queen's mirror prop mid-scene, just as the actress delivered her most chilling line. No one broke character. And again, it stayed in the film. Strange, too, was the mirror itself. Crafted from multiple layers of mirrored glass and smart projection tech, it was meant to display a pre-rendered reflection, a visual trick for actors to respond to. But during one rehearsal, the actress playing the Queen reportedly turned to it and saw herself. Not in costume. Not in lighting. But as she looked days earlier, dressed in sweats, makeup-free, walking past a coffee cart. The feed had somehow pulled an old camera recording from off-site. It was a technical error, they were told. But no one could explain how it had accessed that footage. She refused to rehearse with the mirror alone after that. Then there was the apple. The infamous apple was designed to look not just beautiful, but unreal. Painted by hand with a gloss made from crushed beetles and layered resin, it shimmered with a depth that made it look almost synthetic. They made dozens of them. But only one, Apple No. 7, ever looked quite right on camera. Every time they shot with a different one, something felt off. The color flattened. The light didn't catch. But with No. 7, the frame glowed. The crew started calling it the one. When they wrapped, it mysteriously vanished. Still hasn't been found. Unusual accidents plagued the production, too. During one scene where the Queen was meant to walk barefoot through the Great Hall, the marble floors, real, imported stone, cracked beneath her heel. No one had moved the camera. No weight load exceeded safety standards. And yet a line of fracture curved perfectly behind her steps, like a trail. Lighting glitches became common in that same hallway. Bulbs would blow in sequence. Cameras would short only when filming particular dialogue. One boom mic operator reported hearing a voice whispering the Queen's lines before the actress spoke them, on a closed set. That day, the entire audio crew re-recorded the sequence in silence, unwilling to risk capturing whatever it was again. And then there was the dress. The Queen's final gown, black as night, laced with beetle-wing iridescence and velvet so dense it absorbed stage light, was said to be cursed. Not in the traditional sense. But something about it unsettled the actors. Two background performers refused to be in the same room while it was being adjusted. One wardrobe assistant claimed the fabric gave her a nosebleed. Another, more skeptical crew member, joked it was all psychological, until the train caught on a nail that hadn't been there the day before and tore clean through 3 layers of reinforced silk. The production paused for an hour. No one spoke. Even the director, famously stoic, admitted that day that the dress didn't want to be touched. Animals, too, seemed to respond to the energy on set. The trained deer refused to cross certain patches of the constructed forest. The fox, used in multiple sequences, would freeze whenever the Queen entered the scene, even when off-camera. And then there was the owl that showed up mid-shoot one evening, perching silently above the set for 3 hours before vanishing into the rafters. It was never seen again. Despite, or perhaps because of, these oddities, the atmosphere on set was deeply respectful. The cast spoke in hushed tones before scenes. Crew members touched wood before rolling. A jar of salt was kept just off frame in the Queen's dressing room, just in case. It became tradition to light one candle at the edge of the forest set before shooting, though no one could remember when the habit began. One of the stranger human stories came from the youngest actor, a child playing the most innocent of the 7 outcasts. During lunch, he would sit alone near the crystal coffin prop. Not playing, just talking. One day, someone asked him why. "I'm telling her stories," he said, "so she doesn't get lonely." No one taught him that. The prop coffin was another oddity. Made from recycled glass and reclaimed wood, it weighed over 300 pounds and required 6 people to move. But during the final day of shooting the awakening scene, it cracked, hairline, unplanned, right as the actress opened her eyes. Some wanted to reshoot. But when they watched the footage, the timing was too perfect. It was like the world itself exhaled with her. The film's composer later shared that the main musical motif, the one that swells as the girl reclaims her story, came to him in a dream. He woke in the middle of the night, wrote it down on a napkin, and played it exactly once before recording. That single take is what made it into the film. When asked why he didn't revise it, he said, "Because it wasn't mine. I was just borrowing it." Even post-production wasn't safe from strangeness. The editors found a frame in one reel, just one, that wasn't in the script. A forest path at twilight. No actors. No crew. Just stillness and a blur at the edge, like someone had been there and left just as the shutter clicked. They checked every camera. No explanation. The frame was quietly cut, but the editor kept a copy. "I don't know why," he said. "It just felt like it belonged somewhere else." And maybe that's the truth of it. This wasn't a film built from storyboards and shot lists. It was conjured, coaxed into being by a crew that believed in fairy tales enough to treat them with fear and reverence. The strange facts weren't failures. They were signs. Not everything can be explained. Not everything should. Because some stories aren't just retold, they wake up. And when they do, the world shifts. The snow falls. The mirror watches. And somewhere out of frame, the magic remembers. It begins with an illusion, delicate, gleaming, deadly. The mirror. A symbol that has followed the tale through centuries, refracted through culture, twisted in retellings, passed from page to stage to screen. But in this version, it is more than a prop. It is a conversation between power and perception. From a critical lens, the mirror is not merely an object of vanity. It is the first significant event that unravels the emotional thesis of the entire story. It reflects the truth that power built on appearance is inherently fragile. That no crown can silence the gnawing fear of being replaced. When the Queen asks it the question, "Who is the fairest of them all?" what she's really asking is, "Am I still enough?" It's a question every generation has asked itself in one way or another, and one that this story refuses to answer gently. Instead, it strips back the illusion. The mirror doesn't lie, but neither does it soothe. It forces characters, and the audience, to confront their deepest insecurities, unfiltered and unkind. The moment the mirror fractures, mid-film, isn't just an aesthetic beat. It's thematic rupture. The Queen's control over her image, her story, her kingdom, all shatter in tandem. And that is the brilliance of this narrative structure. Every physical event has emotional resonance. Every visual choice is an echo of something internal. Take the escape into the forest traditionally, it's a flight from danger. But here, it's a transformative plunge into the unknown. Critics have noted how the forest acts as a liminal space, a mythic threshold where character is not just tested, but remade. The production design shifts dramatically. The palace is cold, symmetrical, sterile. The forest breathes. It resists control. Trees lean into paths. Wind moves without direction. light dapples instead of shining. This shift marks the story's real first turning point. It isn't when the queen sends the huntsman. It's when the girl finds herself among roots and thorns. For critics, this moment signals the story's rejection of traditional fantasy structures. Instead of being a passive survivor, the protagonist becomes an active participant in her own myth. And in doing so, the film begins to shed its fairy tale skin. The forest is also where the world begins to widen. The 7 outcasts, often sidelined in previous versions, are reimagined here not as quirky caricatures, but as deeply scarred and intricately drawn individuals. Their backstories are not comic relief. They are echoes of the film's core idea, that value is often misjudged by surface. That those pushed to the margins carry wisdom forged in exile. The way the film handles their integration into the protagonist's journey is deceptively powerful. It's not transactional. It's communal. Each character encounter in this forest becomes a piece of thematic architecture. The healer who hides his hands because they're scarred. The seer who speaks in riddles because her truths were once punished. The warrior who lost everything because he protected something that didn't look royal enough to matter. Each of them adds to the film's growing critique of systemic beauty and inherited power. When the girl learns from them, she doesn't gain a sword or a prophecy. She gains perspective. That's a subversion critics have celebrated widely. It's not about external magic, it's about internal clarity. And that shift culminates in one of the film's quietest yet most important sequences, the dream in the clearing. As she sleeps by the fire, haunted by whispers of her past, she envisions herself standing alone in a white void. A faceless court surrounds her, applauding. But when she looks down, her feet are rooted in ice. She can't move. The applause becomes mocking. The court melts into smoke. And the voice of the queen rings out, not angry, but pitying. "You'll never be more than what I made you." She wakes up gasping. This dream scene, dissected extensively in early reviews, is the moment where the story transitions fully into a fable of reclamation. It's where the protagonist's arc shifts from survival to authorship. No longer does she simply want to return home. She wants to define it. And then comes the apple. Here, too, the film does something daring. The apple is not a trick, it's a choice. The queen doesn't disguise herself. She walks into the forest, in full regalia, and offers the fruit with no deception. "You can fight," she says, "but it will never end. Take this. Sleep. Be free." And the girl accepts. Why? That question stirred a flurry of critical debate. Was it a failure of resolve? A misstep in pacing? Or was it something more deliberate? The dominant reading, and the one most emotionally resonant, is that this moment is not surrender. It's transformation. By accepting the apple, the girl takes control of her story in a way the queen never expected. She makes herself the myth. The queen, so obsessed with eliminating her, unknowingly cements her legacy. The bite isn't defeat. It's defiance. The subsequent silence, the long, aching sequence of mourning, the forest wrapped in stillness, becomes a meditation on legacy. The girl's body in the glass coffin, surrounded not by royals but by outcasts, reverses the classic image. Here, beauty is not static perfection. It is earned stillness. The camera lingers on details, a hand twitching, breath caught, lips refusing to pale. It dares the viewer to see death as a pause, not an end. And then comes the awakening. Not from a prince. Not from destiny. But from presence. A traveler, drawn by the story, not to save, but to witness. When he takes her hand, he doesn't kiss her. He listens. He tells her a story. One of loss. One of survival. One that mirrors hers. And it's this act of recognition, of mutual remembering, that pulls her back. Critics lauded this moment for its emotional honesty. It rejects the trope of romantic awakening and instead offers something more nuanced, connection as resurrection. The soul doesn't rise for love. It rises for understanding. And then the return. Not to a coronation. Not to a battle. But to a confrontation of truths. The Queen, by this point, is unraveling. Her spells falter. Her beauty, once pristine, begins to flicker. In her final scene, she stands before a mirror that no longer shows her reflection. It shows the girl, strong, awake, unbroken. And for a brief moment, the Queen sees herself as she is. That breakdown is brutal. Not explosive, but intimate. She crumples, not because she is defeated, but because she is seen. The film doesn't kill her. It exiles her, not out of mercy, but to let her live with the truth. That her power was built on fear. And fear, once named, dissolves. This resolution stunned audiences. There was no climactic duel. No burning castle. Just a quiet choice. The girl could have taken the throne, could have become what the Queen was. Instead, she leaves the crown untouched. She walks into the square, into the people, and speaks not of her title, but of what she's learned. Critically, this is where the film secured its resonance. By refusing spectacle in favor of catharsis. By allowing its heroine to be powerful without domination. By letting empathy rewrite. Legacy reviewers called it a subversion carved in glass and bone. Others called it a film that dares to believe silence can be revolutionary. Audiences wept not at the danger, but at the grace. Because in the end, what the film asked wasn't, who is the fairest? It asked, who gets to choose what their story means? And that, perhaps more than any spell or mirror or kingdom, is the question that lingers. It lingers long after the credits roll. In the hush of a theater seat, in the reflection on the screen, and in the voice that finally speaks, not as a princess, but as a person, fully seen. It began with a question. Not a question of casting or script, but a quieter, older one whispered in a corner room of a studio meeting. What would it take to make a fairy tale feel like it was happening for the first time? That single spark lit the flame for what would become one of the most daring and detail-obsessed productions in recent memory. Reimagining a legend known across continents and generations wasn't just about spectacle, it was about sincerity. And every decision that followed was made with that question echoing in the background. The production started long before the cameras rolled, with the decision to avoid green screens as much as humanly possible. The director, known for her obsessive dedication to realism even in fantasy, insisted on grounding the story in places that felt tangible. If her feet don't touch real earth, she said, then we haven't told the truth. That philosophy shaped the very bones of the shoot. What might have been created on computers was instead built, grown, or carved by hand. The forest, for example, was not a single location but a mosaic of natural sites stitched together by clever transitions. One path curved through the Scottish Highlands, another through deep Polish woodland, and several more were constructed from scratch in a massive soundstage in Germany, complete with real soil, planted trees, and working weather systems. Every leaf was placed with intention. Fog machines were synchronized with lighting rigs to mimic morning mist. Even the birdsong was mapped to the region being depicted in the scene, so no species would chirp out of place. The Queen's Palace, by contrast, was built to feel cold and eternal. The production designers took inspiration from brutalist architecture, Gothic cathedrals, and minimalist Japanese interiors to create a space that could feel both ancient and futuristic. Hundreds of columns were sculpted from concrete dyed with ash. Hallways were designed to disorient, with perspective tricks that made the corridors seem endless. And at the heart of it all stood the throne room, dominated by a mirror that wasn't just a set piece but a technological marvel. The mirror, nicknamed Whispers by the crew, was made of real glass layered with LED projection and motion tracking. It responded to the actor's position and lighting in real time. It took nearly 6 months to design and 3 more to install. The result was so convincing that, during rehearsal, several actors mistakenly believed it was displaying live reflections. The Queen's actress reportedly avoided making eye contact with it unless cameras were rolling. "It sees too much," she once joked, though never more than once. Filming her scenes became a carefully choreographed ritual. Her costumes, massive intricate gowns that weighed up to 40 pounds each, had to be managed by 2 handlers per take. The seams were sewn with thread dyed in blackcurrant, and each ensemble included a hidden pouch of lavender to calm nerves on long days. Her crown, designed to resemble twisted roots and shattered glass, had 63 individual pieces and took nearly an hour to fasten. The lead actress playing the girl, by contrast, wore costumes that evolved visibly as the film progressed. Her earliest looks were structured and stiff, reflecting the constraints of palace life. But as the story pushed her into the forest, the materials changed, softened, dirted, dyed with actual clay and rainwater. By the final act, her dress had been washed in a river to give it a natural fade, and hand-stitched repairs from earlier scenes remained visible, a quiet nod to her journey. The crew paid similar attention to props. The poisoned apple, for instance, wasn't created in post-production. It was a real piece of fruit, custom-grown and coated in a resin glaze that preserved its sheen under the hot lights. Dozens were made, but only one, Apple 12, ended up on screen. It was the only one that shimmered just right when turned in the protagonist's hand. A prop assistant was assigned solely to carry and care for it, storing it in a velvet-lined case between takes. The coffin scene, one of the most emotionally charged moments in the film, was also one of the most complex. The crystal was real, cut from a synthetic composite and layered to resemble quartz. Its base had mechanical lifts that adjusted depending on camera height. It was so heavy, it had to be wheeled in on rails. Every time the scene was shot, the actress had to hold her breath for over 30 seconds, remaining perfectly still under lights and reflections. She trained with breath coaches to master it, and the result was a haunting stillness that moved even the boom operators. Sound was treated like an actor itself. Foley artists were brought onto the set during filming, rather than afterward, to capture natural ambience in real time. They walked in step with the characters behind soundproof curtains, snapping twigs and rustling cloaks to match movement. One artist reportedly recorded the exact sound of the Queen's heels on every different palace surface, wood, stone, glass, so transitions between scenes could carry emotional weight. The score, composed by a team of 3, was written largely before filming began. They spent weeks living in a cabin near the forest sets, writing music inspired by the rustle of trees and the drip of water from moss. The main theme, a swelling melancholic melody tied to the protagonist's growth, was recorded with an orchestra of 120 but featured instruments like bone flutes, hammered dulcimer, and voice harmonics rarely used in film. In one standout scene, the composer layered her breath into the background as an ambient rhythm. It's there. You feel it more than hear it. Unscripted moments also left their mark. During a night shoot in the deep forest, an owl appeared, unplanned and untrained, and perched above the set. It stayed there for the entire scene, hooting once when the final line was delivered. The director, known for her meticulous planning, stood silently for a long time before saying, "We're not topping that. Moving on." The shot was never res-hot. Another time, while filming a confrontation between the girl and the Queen, the actress lost her voice mid-scene. Instead of cutting, the crew kept rolling. She continued, whispering the lines, eyes blazing. The quietness made the scene electric. That take is what ended up in the final cut, and viewers would never guess it wasn't planned. Despite the intensity of the material, the set was known for unexpected bursts of joy. The 7 supporting actors, each playing one of the forest outcasts, formed a tight-knit troupe that rehearsed in character even during off-hours. They improvised new lines, cooked meals on an open flame near their trailers, and even performed shadow plays between takes for visiting press. One journalist wrote, "They're like a traveling band of misfit philosophers." Between takes, the lead actress would sketch in her journal, drawings of trees, stars, the Queen's crown cracked in half. These sketches were later framed and gifted to crew members at RAP. One of them hangs in the editor's suite to this day, next to a small scrap of paper that reads, "We told the story. Now let it breathe." That sense of reverence bled into every department. The cinematographer shot nearly every scene with natural light where possible, timing sunrise shots to the second. The makeup team studied historical techniques, using charcoal and berry stain instead of synthetic products. Even the food props were real. Fresh bread, hand-churned butter, root vegetables sourced from local farms near each filming location. The film wrapped 6 days over schedule, but under budget, rare, especially for a fantasy epic. When it premiered to the cast and crew, there were no speeches. Just a single screening in a private forest-side theater with candles lining the aisles and soft pine scent diffused into the air. They watched in silence. And when the lights returned, no one moved. Because what they'd made wasn't just a film. It was a ritual. A love letter to story, to struggle, to the quiet power of choosing to grow in the dark. Every odd occurrence, every tearful rehearsal, every burst bulb and wild animal, all became part of the legend. And though the audience would never see the sweat behind the spectacle, they would feel it. They'd feel the real moss beneath the girl's feet, the weight of the mirror watching from the shadows, the breathless stillness of a story choosing to wake up again. And somewhere, behind the scenes, the forest would remember. It begins with silence. Not emptiness, not absence, but a kind of breath-holding hush, the kind that happens just before something breaks or something begins. And from this silence, a world slowly unveils itself. A world where light drips like honey through a crooked canopy of ancient trees, where mist clings to the roots of the earth like memory, and stone corridors echo with footsteps not yet taken. Before a single word is spoken, the film speaks to the audience in whispers of setting, in glances, in textures, in the color of the sky at twilight. This isn't just a story told through characters. It's a story carved into the land itself. The kingdom stands at the edge of the world, as though it were never meant to be fully reached. Tall, slender towers slice through clouds like spears of ambition, their facades washed in grays and silvers that shimmer more like warnings than decoration. Every window is narrow, every door heavy with intent. This is not a place where laughter was ever meant to echo. The court itself seems designed to crush warmth before it can bloom. But it is beautiful, striking in its austerity, a marvel of symmetry and cold elegance. And it makes the Queen's reign feel inevitable. Inside, the light is never golden. It is white, blanched, unforgiving. Cinematographers described it as clinical beauty, a palette meant to reflect preservation rather than life. The throne room, vast and echoing, is all sharp angles and long shadows. No tapestries, no warmth. Only marble floors that reflect faces distorted and pale. Here, the mirror is mounted in silence, framed by obsidian and set against a wall that never catches the sun. The throne itself is carved not from wood, but from bone-white stone, veined with something that might once have been gold, now dulled with age and envy. But beyond these walls lies another world entirely. The forest. Alive, breathing, untamable. From the very first frame within it, the contrast is jarring. Gone is the order, the symmetry. The camera no longer moves in steady, calculated glides. It follows, handheld, organic, reactive. Trees stretch upward like arms, their branches weaving a canopy that shimmers with dappled light. The green is not uniform. It is chaotic, feral, vibrant. Each leaf seems to hold a story. Mushrooms bloom in odd corners. Stones hum with moss. And in the distance, waterfalls sing in tones that never resolve. This is a sacred place, and the film treats it as such. The production design extended far beyond what the audience might consciously notice. Every layer of foliage was curated. Every path that the protagonist walks was laid down with intention and then disrupted, scraped, broken, shaped by the footsteps of travelers before her. The set designers brought in dirt from old-growth forests and let it sit under heat lamps for weeks to let the scent of the earth thicken the air. That scent? It lingers in every frame. Light becomes a character in the forest. It filters through cracks in ways that feel accidental but were, in fact, painstakingly rehearsed. Mirrors were placed out of frame to catch morning sun and redirect it into unexpected pockets. Scenes shift from warm amber to deep blue within seconds, often without a single cut. When the girl walks deeper into the woods, the world grows darker, not because night has fallen, but because the trees are closing in. There is no clear direction, only feeling. And then, within that wildness, the cabin appears. Not quaint, not storybook, but something rough and sacred. A place that looks grown rather than built. The walls are slanted, the shingles covered in lichen. Inside, nothing matches, and yet everything belongs. The fire pit is cracked. The chairs are carved by different hands. Dust dances in slants of window light that shift with every scene. Here, the girl becomes herself, not because the forest gives her power, but because it doesn't ask her to hide. Cinematographically, the cabin is treated with reverence. Static shots are rare. Instead, the camera floats, moving with her breath, lingering on her fingers brushing the table or the steam rising from a bowl. Here, the lens finds intimacy, stillness, a kind of tactile closeness that the palace never allowed. When she speaks, her voice doesn't echo, it settles. And that shift tells the audience everything. She is not echoing someone else's story anymore. She is beginning her own. The apple, too, has its place in the film's visual language. It first appears not as an object, but as color, a red too rich to be natural. It glows in scenes where it should not be. A ribbon, a thread, a berry too bright in the background. It haunts the frame until it is finally placed in her hand. And when she bites, the camera pulls back, not in panic, but in reverence. A single wide shot. One fall of her body. No music. Just wind. Just silence. That restraint, so rare in modern cinema, is what makes the moment unforgettable. And then, the coffin. The most surreal setting in the film. Not built in a set, but on a mountaintop, real and cruel and stunning. Snow lies in jagged drifts, untouched. The glass is thick and imperfect, warping her face just slightly as if time is trying to take her but cannot. Around her, the forest waits. The cabin is gone. The court is gone. Only nature remains. The coffin was filmed during dawn, when light is both soft and merciless. Every shadow is long. Every sound is distant. It is a death scene that feels like a birth. And yet, the return to the palace does not betray this tone. When the protagonist walks through the broken gates, the world does not cheer. It holds its breath. The set remains unchanged, cold, rigid, but the lens does not flinch from it. It records her passage as something mythic. The light no longer blinds. It follows. The throne room remains vast, but the way it is lit, now from below, with warmth rising from the floor rather than descending from above, signals something shifted. The Queen's fall is not grand. It is quiet, intimate. She is framed in tight, breathy close-ups, her crown slipping, her voice failing to echo in a hall that once swallowed sound. The mirror cracks without shattering, a sound like a sigh. And in that final shot, when she is no longer reflected, the camera finally turns away. The final sequence doesn't return to spectacle. It returns to earth. Back to the forest. Back to roots. The closing shot is not of the palace reclaimed or the court bowing. It is of the girl, now no longer a girl, kneeling to plant something. A seed. Her fingers press into the soil, and the camera rises slowly. Trees curve above her. Light filters down. And just before it fades to black, the world breathes in. The settings in this film do not exist to decorate. They do not frame the characters. They express them. The palace is the lie. The forest is the truth. The cabin is the transformation. And the final shot, the seed, is the beginning. Every angle, every texture, every hue was chosen not to impress, but to tell. To whisper, again and again. The story is not in what you see, it's in what the world becomes when someone dares to change it. It always starts with quiet. Not the silence of isolation, but the kind of hush that settles just before the lights come up and the first take begins. The air holds its breath. The cameras don't hum yet. The forest set, even indoors, feels like it's listening. And someone, often the director, says something simple, like, "Let's begin." But behind those words is 1,000 tiny battles already fought, and 100 unexpected joys no script could have predicted. This film's journey began long before the first slate clapped. It started in a warehouse, where art department sketches sprawled across tables like myths come to life. Every leaf, every crack in the palace wall, every piece of armor had to mean something. "We weren't just making a fantasy," one crew member recalled. "We were making memory, something that felt like it already existed before we filmed it." The commitment to that philosophy shaped everything. And sometimes it made for chaos. Take the forest. A living, breathing character in the story, but also a logistical puzzle. The production didn't settle for CGI trees. Instead, they transported over 40 live saplings into an indoor soundstage and constructed the rest from foam, plaster, bark, and handmade moss that was misted every 3 hours to stay soft and realistic. But with that realism came quirks. On more than one occasion, a branch would drop sap onto lighting rigs, or ants would appear mid-scene, crawling into an actor's sleeve. No one was ever angry. They called it the forest testing us. The actors adapted to this spirit quickly. The lead, known for her sharp intellect and quiet grace, embraced the wilderness. Mud in her hair, bare feet through ice water, hours of silent takes where her only partner was wind. She refused a body double, even for wide shots that required hiking into isolated terrain. "If she's going to find herself out there," she said, "then I want to get lost with her first." The crew built hidden trails and safety nets, but she rarely used them. In one iconic scene, she walks through a river at dawn. That was real. Freezing. One take. Her breath fogged in the air like she was stepping between worlds. The Queen's actress, on the other hand, brought theater to the forest. Regal and commanding even off-camera, she would arrive on set already in character, sweeping through the trailers like royalty. But she had a wicked sense of humor. Between takes, she'd belt out pop songs in full costume, mirror crown gleaming, makeup unshaken. One day, she performed an impromptu parody musical called Mirror, Mirror for the crew during lunch. Someone filmed it. The footage exists, but no one dares leak it. It's sacred. Their dynamic was electric from day one. During their first scene together, the director cleared the set. No boom mics, no script supervisors, just one camera rolling. The Queen whispered her lines like spells. The girl responded with silence, then a single tear. The moment wasn't scripted that way. But it was perfect. The take made it into the final cut. Afterward, neither actor spoke for nearly an hour. "We had to come down slowly," the Queen's actress said. "It was like holding fire between our hands." There were light-hearted moments, too. The 7 actors who played the forest-dwelling outcasts became a real-life troupe. They shared a single trailer, by choice, and often rewrote their dialogue together, adding subtle humor, folk songs, and improvised rituals. One day, they surprised the lead with a birthday celebration in character, complete with acorn cupcakes and a handmade flower crown. "It was like being adopted by the weirdest, kindest uncles in the world," she said, laughing. One of the youngest among them insisted on being called the Watcher on set and wouldn't break character. He carried a wooden flute everywhere and refused to speak unless prompted. On the final day of shooting, he gave each cast member a folded note. Inside each one was a single sentence, cryptic and poetic. No one knows how long he'd been writing them. The crew often found themselves swept up in these moments. The sound technician started composing haikus inspired by scenes. The script supervisor kept a running journal of unfilmable moments that somehow made it on screen. The grip department formed a secret betting pool on which actor would forget their lines first on any given day. Ironically, it was usually the director. And the mirror, the mirror. The centerpiece of the Queen's throne room was infamous. Built with real glass and a responsive LED core, it was both beautiful and cursed. On the third day of shooting, it malfunctioned and displayed a crew member's startled reflection during a pivotal emotional scene. "The Queen is not supposed to see Phil from catering," the director muttered, deadpan. The mirror earned a nickname after that, Phil's Portal. Lighting it became its own saga. The mirror absorbed and reflected light in unpredictable ways. The cinematographer eventually developed a system of bouncing indirect sunlight off mirrored trays into the throne room to avoid glare. The result was hauntingly organic, soft pulses of light that seemed to breathe with the Queen's moods. Some scenes took days longer than expected. The resurrection sequence, the girl awakening in the glass coffin, was so delicate that filming paused multiple times due to fog inside the glass. The production team eventually discovered that the actress's breath, warmed slightly from tea between takes, was causing condensation. The solution: mint water and ice cubes held in her mouth seconds before action was called. "That scene almost defeated us," one assistant said, "but when she opened her eyes, no one breathed. It was like watching history exhale." Animals, too, added mischief. The owl cast as the Queen's familiar refused to stay on its perch. It would fly into the rafters and hoot at exactly the wrong moments. In one take, it swooped down just as the Queen delivered her most sinister monologue. Instead of cutting, the actress incorporated it, extending a hand and murmuring, "Even the night listens." That take was used. The horses were more cooperative, except for one. A black stallion meant to carry the Queen during a dramatic storm sequence had a habit of sneezing the moment rain machines started. It sneezed on the Queen, on the camera, on a PA carrying props. Every single time. Eventually, it was replaced by a stand-in horse that proved more photogenic, though less expressive. Rain, ironically, was never fake. The production waited for real storms. There were nights the cast huddled in tents while lightning lit the sky outside. The director would stand in the rain, wrapped in a tarp, watching clouds roll in. "We'll shoot when the world agrees with us," she'd say. Sometimes that meant one scene in 5 days. But the footage glowed. Despite the intensity, there was little ego on set. The director encouraged collaboration at every level. Grip assistants could offer notes on blocking. Actors could question their own arcs. One of the most crucial changes to the final scene, when the girl plants a seed in the earth instead of taking the throne, came from a props designer. "What if she leaves something behind instead of picking something up?" she asked. And just like that, the ending shifted. Rain, ironically, was never fake. The production waited for real storms. There were nights the cast huddled in tents while lightning lit the sky outside. The director would stand in the rain, wrapped in a tarp, watching clouds roll in. "We'll shoot when the world agrees with us," she'd say. Sometimes that meant one scene in 5 days. But the footage glowed. Despite the intensity, there was little ego on set. The director encouraged collaboration at every level. Grip assistants could offer notes on blocking. Actors could question their own arcs. One of the most crucial changes to the final scene, when the girl plants a seed in the earth instead of taking the throne, came from a props designer. "What if she leaves something behind instead of picking something up?" she asked. And just like that, the ending shifted. The horses were more cooperative, except for one. A black stallion meant to carry the Queen during a dramatic storm sequence had a habit of sneezing the moment rain machines started. It sneezed on the Queen, on the camera, on a PA carrying props. Every single time. Eventually, it was replaced by a stand-in horse that proved more photogenic, though less expressive. Rain, ironically, was never fake. The production waited for real storms. There were nights the cast huddled in tents while lightning lit the sky outside. The director would stand in the rain, wrapped in a tarp, watching clouds roll in. "We'll shoot when the world agrees with us," she'd say. Sometimes that meant one scene in 5 days. But the footage glowed. Despite the intensity, there was little ego on set. The director encouraged collaboration at every level. Grip assistants could offer notes on blocking. Actors could question their own arcs. One of the most crucial changes to the final scene, when the girl plants a seed in the earth instead of taking the throne, came from a props designer. "What if she leaves something behind instead of picking something up?" she asked. And just like that, the ending shifted. By the final week, the crew had transformed into something more like a tribe. They spoke in shorthand. They took turns carrying gear for the youngest. When the final take wrapped, just before dawn, mist clinging to the valley, they didn't clap. They lit lanterns and walked, silently, back to the trailers. That's the thing about stories born in the dirt and told through breath and bark. They change the people who make them. This wasn't a production built on spectacle. It was forged in silence, in frost, in laughter between thunderclaps. And those who were there don't just remember the shots. They remember how the forest sounded at midnight. How the Queen laughed off camera. How the mirror always seemed to be watching, even when it was off. And somewhere, buried between frame and shadow, you can still feel it. A crew who didn't just make a fairy tale, they lived one. It begins, as all ancient stories do, with a question wrapped in a mirror. Not, "Who is the fairest of them all?" but something far older, something stitched into the roots of every tale passed down in hushed tones before sleep. What is worth being remembered for? That is the heart that pulses beneath this story's skin, beneath the lace and thorn, beneath the snow and blood. It may wear the face of a fairy tale, but what lives inside it is something more enduring. Something aching. Something true. At the center of this story is a girl whose beauty is both blessing and curse. But this is not a tale about how beauty wins. It is about what beauty costs, and about how that cost, like the threads of a spell, can wrap around lives and twist them into shapes they were never meant to become. The Queen, the mirror, the forest, the apple, they are not just narrative devices. They are symbols, each carrying the weight of a theme too sharp to name out loud. The mirror is the first to speak. Cold, honest, unforgiving. It does not flatter. It does not lie. It only reflects. But in this film, reflection is not truth, it is prison. The Queen looks into the mirror not to see the world, but to see her worth. And what she sees, day by day, is a vanishing act. Youth slipping. Praise waning. Eyes wandering elsewhere. Her fear is not just of aging. It is of becoming invisible. Of no longer being seen. And so, the mirror becomes her altar, and she becomes its priestess, willing to sacrifice anything, anyone, to keep the illusion alive. Her obsession speaks to one of the film's loudest themes, the fragility of identity built on external validation. Beauty, here, is a currency, one the Queen uses to hold power. But it's counterfeit. She doesn't own it. It owns her. The more she tries to preserve it, the more brittle she becomes. Her power decays even as her reflection remains flawless. And when the mirror finally cracks, not physically, but symbolically, it is not just a fracture in glass. It's a fracture in self. Opposite her is the girl, also beautiful. But not for show. Her beauty is described with reverence, yes, but not obsession. It is not her armor. It is not her goal. The world projects meaning onto her face, but she doesn't use it to speak. She uses her silence, her listening, her resilience. While the queen clings to appearance, the girl sheds it. She strips away silk and polish, walks barefoot, fights with dirt on her hands. And as she does, she uncovers something the queen never dared touch: authentic power. The forest becomes her crucible. It is the space between girl and woman, between legend and self. In this film, the forest isn't danger. It is truth. Wild, uncontrolled. It doesn't flatter or judge. It simply is. And it forces her to be the same. When she enters, she is fleeing. But as the days pass, the forest begins to reflect her, not in a mirror, but in experience. The paths don't lead. She must find them. The animals don't kneel. She must respect them. The people she meets do not bow. She must earn them. This initiates another core theme: transformation through trial. The journey is not about learning a skill. It's about unlearning everything that held her captive. Obedience, politeness, the need to be palatable. The girl learns, slowly, that she does not need to be loved to be worthy. She does not need to be chosen to be powerful. She only needs to choose herself. The apple, when it finally arrives, is not temptation. It is test. It gleams like desire. Promises rest. But beneath the sheen is surrender. A bite means believing what the queen believes, that peace can only come through escape. But the girl's choice to take that bite is not weakness. It is strategy. In one reading, it is a sacrifice. In another, it is a dare. A moment that says, I will rise even from this. And rise she does. The glass coffin is, perhaps, the story's most misunderstood symbol. It looks like death. But it isn't. It is pause. Cocoon. The world freezes around her, and in that stillness, something shifts. For the queen, beauty meant freezing time. For the girl, it means enduring it. She does not decay in that coffin because she is not dead. She is becoming. And when she wakes, she is not the same. She doesn't return to reclaim a crown. She returns to reclaim a voice. That distinction draws out another deep theme: power as choice, not inheritance. She was born royal. But she becomes sovereign by rejecting the systems that made her suffer. The queen rules through fear. The girl rules through presence, not performance. When she enters the palace, she doesn't demand submission. She offers truth. And truth, here, is the most dangerous magic of all. Let's return to the mirror. When the queen stands before it in the final act, it no longer shows her reflection. It shows the girl. Not because she has taken the queen's place, but because she has become something the queen never could: whole. The mirror, now cracked, tells no lies. It offers no flattery. It simply shows what is. And what is, in that moment, is both beautiful and devastating. Because the queen's final breakdown is not a fall from power. It is the crumbling of illusion. She sees herself, truly, for the first time. Not ageless. Not adored. But alone. Fragile. Human. It is not her death that marks the climax. It is her recognition. And in that recognition lies a subtle, sorrowful truth. Villains are often victims of the same myths they enforce. Thematically, this is the film's sharpest blade. That the system the queen used to hurt others, beauty as power, power as validation, was the same system that hurt her first. She didn't create the myth. She became its most devoted disciple. Her cruelty wasn't born from joy. It was born from fear. And in that fear, she became monstrous. Symbolism threads this truth throughout the film. The cracked crown. The wilting flowers that surround her bedchamber. The birds that no longer sing when she enters the forest. Even the color red, used in the apple, the girl's lips, the queen's gowns, shifts meaning throughout. At first, it symbolizes temptation. Then, blood. Then, Finally, rebirth. Red becomes not the color of death, but of decision. And decision, in this story, is sacred. That's what the girl earns. Not magic, not marriage, but the right to choose. To stay. To speak. To walk away from the throne and plant a seed instead. The final scene, silent, slow, no music, captures this perfectly. She kneels in soil. Presses a seed into earth. No applause. No coronation. Just the wind. The choice to grow something new where something old had rotted. Critically, this moment has drawn endless praise. Because it closes the loop. The girl who began her story running from death ends it by planting life. She doesn't win by defeating the queen. She wins by refusing to become her. And so, in the end, the symbols linger. The mirror, empty. The apple, fallen. The forest, waiting. And the story, whispered not in triumph, but in transformation. A tale not about who is fairest, but about who is free. It begins in shadows. Not total darkness, but something far more deliberate, an absence of light where it should exist. A world sculpted by restraint, by decisions made frame by frame to whisper rather than shout. From its first image, this film doesn't simply unfold, it reveals. Slowly. Meticulously. Like a story being unearthed rather than told. And beneath every line of dialogue, beneath every flicker of movement, is a language you don't hear but feel. The language of craft. Of technique. Of filmmakers who understood that the way you show a story can matter just as deeply as the story itself. Every decision in the film was built around atmosphere. It wasn't about grandeur for grandure's sake. This wasn't a story that needed noise. It needed texture, depth, breath. The camera didn't soar. It lingered. It crept. It watched. In the palace, the lens stood still, composed like a painting, capturing symmetry so rigid it felt oppressive. The queen's halls were framed with locked shots, cold lighting, and near-static angles. Her world was designed to feel sterile, claustrophobic, controlled. And the cinematographer delivered that feeling not with effects, but with patience. They used long lenses to flatten the space, to make walls feel closer, ceilings lower. Even in vast rooms, the camera made the viewer feel boxed in. But once the story shifted, once the girl fled into the forest, the visual language broke open. Suddenly, the camera breathed again. It moved with her, handheld at times, drifting behind her shoulder, stumbling over roots and twisting through branches. The lenses grew wider. The focus looser. Light filtered through leaves with a softness that made every moment feel dreamlike but never artificial. Sunlight wasn't created on a soundstage. It was hunted. Cinematographers timed golden hour like ritual. When the light came, everything stopped. Actors waited. Crew held their breath. And then, in that quiet window of magic, they shot. Those changes in visual rhythm weren't just aesthetic. They shaped emotion. When the world felt rigid, so did the story. When it felt fluid, so did the character. As the protagonist changed, the camera changed with her. Her first steps into the woods are tentative, the frame hesitant. But by the time she commands the screen in the final act, the camera lifts, elevated, reverent. She is no longer being watched. She is seen. Lighting became a second storyteller. In the palace, it was harsh and calculated, white and silver tones that exaggerated the queen's complexion to porcelain and rendered every other figure in her orbit pale, diminished. This wasn't a mistake. The makeup department and gaffers collaborated to ensure her face reflected light unnaturally, as if she were lit from within. It gave her an ethereal, ghost-like presence. A woman not quite alive, but preserved. Contrast that with the forest, where light came with imperfections. Flickers through fog. Dappled gold and patches of dark. The girl was never fully lit in those scenes. Part of her was always in shadow, always becoming. And when firelight came, it was messy. It danced across faces, exposing emotion rather than softening it. The warmth made the coldness of the palace feel distant, almost a memory. Color grading tied it all together. The film leaned into a desaturated palette for its first half, muted grays, icy blues, deep forest greens. But it didn't stay there. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, warmth crept in. A crimson scarf. A flicker of amber. The red of the apple. The filmmakers described the color as emotional punctuation. Each hue was placed with purpose. By the time the final scene arrives, sunlit soil, blooming trees, soft linen tunics, the world has changed. Not with magic. With color. But while the visuals carried weight, it was sound that held the soul. The film's sound design was among its most quietly brilliant achievements. You don't always notice it, and that was the point. Footsteps in the Queen's halls echoed too long. Breaths in the forest were caught mid-inhale. Birds called in unfamiliar patterns. Every sonic element was tuned to reflect what the characters felt, not just what they heard. In scenes of dread, silence wasn't silent. It was filled with pressure, subtle low tones, the hum of wind too steady to be real. The forest had its own voice. Not one of animals or weather, but of presence. A rustle here. A groan of bark there. Distant whispers never explained. Music fades. Voices drop. And what's left is a hush so profound it feels like mourning. Not absence. Stillness. The editors held the moment longer than expected. Seconds stretched. Audiences shifted. It was daring. And it worked. The score, too, was a creature of its own. Composed entirely with live instruments, often played in unusual ways, it avoided swelling crescendos. Instead, it murmured. Violins strummed like wind. Cellos plucked like heartbeat. The composer wrote the protagonist's theme in a single night, inspired by her silence, by what she carried rather than what she said. That theme repeats, only 5 notes, but it grows. With every return, the orchestration adds. A drum. A breath. A second voice. Until finally, in the film's last moments, it plays in full harmony. The girl has arrived. Editing was done with reverence to time and rhythm. Scenes weren't cut quickly. They were allowed to settle. The editors often let a character blink before they cut. Let the forest breathe after footsteps passed. There's a discipline to that restraint. It requires trust, in the audience, in the story, in the moment. And it pays off. Because nothing feels rushed. The pacing echoes the old stories told by firelight, unfolding slowly, hauntingly, always a little bit sad and a little bit wise. Dialogue, when it came, was used like poetry. No line was wasted. The script was written with cadence in mind, sentences that rose and fell with rhythm. But even more importantly, the silences between lines were honored. In early drafts, whole scenes existed without speech. The director asked actors to speak with stillness. In rehearsals, they practiced eye contact instead of monologues. The result is a film that listens to itself. All of these choices, the camera, the light, the color, the sound, the rhythm, created an experience that didn't just entertain. It enveloped. You didn't watch this film. You entered it. You wandered its halls. You touched its leaves. You felt the weight of that apple in your palm. And then there was the box office. For a film this quiet, this deliberate, success was never guaranteed. The studio worried. The marketing leaned heavily on mythic imagery, on the legacy of the name. But what brought audiences wasn't nostalgia, it was wonder. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Critics used phrases like hypnotic, a meditation in silk and shadow, a film that doesn't just retell a tale, it haunts it. Opening weekend shattered expectations. Theaters filled not just with children, but with adults, many of them coming back for second, even third viewings. People whispered through the credits. They stayed in their seats. They left the theater quieter than they entered. That was the film's true power, not in noise, but in what it stirred afterward. It broke records internationally, especially in markets where fantasy tends to dominate, but it also thrived in smaller venues, art houses, midnight screenings. It wasn't just a box office win, it was a cultural one. It reminded people that films don't need to scream to be heard. That beauty, when used with care, can still shake something loose inside us. Behind all the numbers, though, were the filmmakers. A crew that made choices not for glory, but for honesty. A cast that didn't act for applause, but for meaning. A story that trusted its audience to walk slowly, to listen deeply, and to feel everything. And that, more than the techniques, more than the revenue, more than the acclaim, is what lingers. Because when the final frame fades to black, and the music gives way to silence, what remains is not just what we saw, but how it felt to be there. It began, as many stories do, with uncertainty. Casting a myth is no small task. You're not just finding actors, you're choosing the faces that audiences will believe lived before time, walked through fairy tale frost and fire, and carried emotions old as the soil. The tale may be familiar, but the breath behind it must feel new. And so, the search didn't begin with stardom. It began with stillness. The director reportedly sat across from each potential lead and asked a single question: "Can you listen in silence and still be understood?" That's how they found her. Not in a screen test or glamour shoot, but in a quiet moment on a rainy afternoon. She didn't recite a monologue. She didn't dazzle with dramatics. She sat, listened, held the moment. And when she finally spoke, her voice was small, real, and unmistakably hers. It wasn't power she projected. It was presence. That was what sealed it. The role wasn't cast. It was claimed in interviews. The lead actress often spoke of the weight she carried into the role, not of expectation, but of memory. "We all grow up with this story in some form," she said. "But I didn't want to play her as a symbol. I wanted to play her as a person who's trying to survive being turned into one." She immersed herself in solitude before filming began. Walked forests barefoot. Wrote letters in character to herself at different ages. By the time cameras rolled, she wasn't pretending to be lost. She had already found her way there. The transformation on screen wasn't just costume or dialogue. It was embodied. The stoop in her posture during the palace scenes was subtle, but real. The widening of her gait as she grew stronger in the forest was rehearsed with movement coaches. Even the way she blinked changed, fewer, slower, more deliberate. She didn't play a heroine. She unfolded into one. Across from her, casting the queen was another revelation. Here was a role so easy to flatten into caricature, so tempting to fill with villainous delight. But the woman they chose approached it differently. She saw the queen not as wicked, but wounded. "She's terrified of being forgotten," she said. "And terror, when buried, becomes cruelty." She studied classical tragedy, watched interviews of aging actresses speaking on beauty, read psychological profiles of leaders clinging to relevance. And then she built a performance out of quiet collapse. Her scenes with the mirror were filmed in near isolation. Crew reduced. Lights dimmed. Her voice would drop to a hush barely picked up by the boom mics. And when she spoke that infamous line, it wasn't with vanity, it was with desperation. "Who is the fairest?" wasn't a taunt. It was a plea. Audiences noticed. Reviews didn't praise her fury. They praised her ache. Between the leads, chemistry wasn't loud or antagonistic. It was layered, built on glances that lingered too long, breath caught at the wrong time. In one particularly raw scene, the queen brushes the girl's hair. It's not in the script. The actors improvised it. I thought, what if she remembered being loved just for a second, the Queen's actress said, and then had to kill it.